So the phrase that I've heard mentioned often is that in an innovation society, time to market is king. So when we have the ability to deploy quickly, like Ronnie's going to talk about here, we win the market, and we have the ability to increase that innovation cycle. Ronnie, you want to fill in the group on the benefits of release management and what we're doing with that?
Sure. So release management is, as much as people like to think about it or like to think that they don't have a release management process, everybody currently has one, whether it's zipping up the binaries and deploying it to a web server or to a file server, whatever the case may be. Everybody has a release management process in place right now today that does software. I guess technically you could even go into hardware. They have release management processes there as well, just in a different form. So going back to the software release management, as Wick mentioned earlier, David Wickersham, with the continuous maturity, we have all these different building blocks. And once you get to the continuous deployment scenario, that's really where release management really comes into play. Without release management, you can't have continuous deployment or continuous delivery, which means you can't get to the continuous value delivery ultimate goal that we have in mind here. And I know a lot of people are going to think, well, I'm, X company, I'm pretty small, or I'm pretty big or large, or whatever the phrase is there, and I'm concerned that I can't do release management correctly. Well, I have a couple examples of really large companies like Google, like Facebook, like Zulily or Etsy, all these big brand confident names that they do release management processes well. They do it on a daily basis. I think I've heard rumors that Facebook launches to production at least 5 times a day, 6 times a day, and they do this through different methodologies. So going back to the continuous integration piece that Rick was talking about, making sure that your code that goes to production is run through unit tests and integration testing and coded tests and all these other different tests, they have confidence that when they push code to production, it's going to work. So you can either go that route, or you can go into what Facebook has called dark launching. And basically that is the scenario where they want to introduce a new feature and they don't want to go directly into production. They don't want to go into mass use quite yet because they want to make sure that it doesn't increase stress on the system, or it doesn't add additional load to the system that's really not needed. So for instance, Facebook's chat system, when they introduced that, that was actually 6 months into the production system before other people were aware of it. And I don't have the exact details of the story there, but I know they released it, and then every message that went through their messaging framework went through their Facebook chat engine, just so they can test the load on the system. They can make sure that their chat subsystem worked correctly. And then there's the other option of feature toggles. I recently read a blog post by somebody who works at Etsy talking about different ways of introducing new features, whether it's database changes or it's features to the application itself. If you want to test that on a small scale, you can use these feature toggles to, for example, if you want to add a new person table or new details to a person table in a database, well, you only want, let's say, 1% of your traffic to use that table so that you can make sure that your table is sufficient, that it does exactly what it needs to do. These feature toggles, although they sound complicated and not so easy to implement, they're actually very powerful. So you can use these feature toggles in pretty much any situation. And then as Chrome introduced with their, Google introduced with Chrome, I guess you can go version infinite. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how often they release, at least 3 or 4 times a week with new features or new improvements, whatever the case may be. But by releasing so often and by keeping this tight loop, they get information from their users about, well, what went wrong, why this feature caused this issue, whatever the case may be, which goes back to the point of shorter release cycles create tight feedback loops. Knowing that information at the very beginning allows them to correct and innovate and learn. That's it.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ronnie. So from a business perspective, just summarizing that a bit, some of the value we get out of a mature release cycle is that tighter feedback loops, getting us closer to that customer, This spawns more realistic expectations and stakeholder alignment, and ultimately improves our time to market. And personally, as a developer by trade, when I entered the market about 20 years ago, deployment meant that you had to write code and you had to stay up on a Saturday night till 3 in the morning to push that out and give up your family time for the weekend in hopes that you could actually launch code to production with minimal issues. Over time, that evolved, and we got to the point where us developers got to stay home, and DevOps was able to do the same thing. And 9 times out of 10, instead of being at work, we got a call from work at 3 a.m. on a Saturday. Now, as we go through this process and continue to evolve, that we're seeing things like these big businesses go into market so fast that as developers, we don't know nor care that something's been launched. It just happens in the background because we have confidence in our quality, we have confidence in our release cycle, and we have confidence in our ability to continuously integrate.